So, kindly help me because I forgot about to what extent I proceed. I can go through the slides and so you can. I remember distinctly that this was assigned as a some sort of report sort of thing assignment for these two critical challenges of energy security of the world and critical challenges of the entire energy security of India. Obviously, national perspective and international perspective. Then, was it discussed? I guess it was. Any feedback from the class?
Yes, sir. This was touched.
This was discussed fully, no?
Yes, sir.
Is it okay? Okay. So this power tariff, Indian practice, and these things has also been discussed. These are important issues because these
No,
are.
sir.
Huh?
That is availability based tariff we have done.
Yes, last portion.
ABT we
Oh,
have
oh,
done,
oh,
sir.
oh, oh, that was my confusion also. Whether I discussed up to ABT, availability based tariff, then the rest part was somehow I could not finish up, no? Okay, due to lack of time. Anyway, so this also I was also confusing, so that's why I just came back to this slide again. Anyway, so this power tariff practice I can start discussing now. Is it visible or I should go to the full screen mode? Because in that case I can access some of the students later. Uh, is it visible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, then I need not to go to the full screen because this is not a formal professional presentation, better to say. Okay, so what is power tariff and how this is related to energy conservation is, you know that the subject we are trying to go through is basically not related to any only scientific principles. There are the socio-human interactions more. So what happen actually whenever there is any opportunity of human participation, then there are certain typical characteristics of social behavior. And unless you can have an estimation or anticipations of the expected social behavior, your principal policies will get lost. Tariff, that's why, is an important aspect of the energy conservation. Why? Because tariff means per unit price of electricity. Now, question is, already maybe I have discussed earlier also that there is a distinct difference in the corporate terminology, even in economics, that what one is called the cost, another is called the price. Now, cost is basically estimated directly from whatever the direct and indirect cost input, or rather financial input for a product or a service. But price is different from cost in that sense, at what price it is sold in the market. Common sense says that the difference between cost and price is the profit, not necessarily. There may be some subsidy input from the government. There may be some other issues involved with additional cess or tax imposed that may not go into the company's profit, but that they will take from the market, and obviously automatically the price will be higher. As you know that the liquor, means the alcohol, has got two category. One category is for industry use, that has got a low tax of the government, but that for the human consumption part, the same alcohol is sold at a much higher price under the government high excise tax, and that is very important issue because as it is discouraged a lot of alcohol consumption by the human being. So obviously tax is imposed, just government can earn money from that selling, because you cannot stop people having something, but what you can do, you can gain benefit of the society out of that. But cigarette is obviously coming to a very critical analysis, and some people and some of the states and countries are going to putting ban on alcohol and cigarette. But what I want to convey the message is the price and the cost are different issues, because whenever you talk about the cost is direct estimations, not direct estimations of the overall direct and indirect financial inputs to a product or service. Okay, just write down because this may be important, because this difference of price and cost is very important. So I write down cost of a product or service is the financial expenditure for delivery of that product or service. to the customer. Product or service to the customer. It needs data of financial expenditure for all direct and indirect financial inputs without any profit earned, PROFIT, profit earned by selling it. So it is clear that cost, whenever we talk about in engineering or industry terminology, is basically the estimations of all financial inputs that you had to give. And in that case, maybe some cases the some of the products is highly taxed and that is coming as your input material, that will be added in the cost part. That will not go to the price part, because all input materials cost, input materials, input service cost, etc., will go as the cost assessment. Now we are coming to the next paragraph. However, the price is defined as, however, the price is defined as at which the product or service will be sold in the market. Full stop. No corporate company, no corporate company generally sells their product without any profit. Here I have told just specifically, just to note that generally, the generally is very important word, because some of the business promotions are selling the price with lots of subsidy, that means loss initially, and then get people habituated and then increase the price. And the geo model has been already accepted in India, and several countries has got that model. Actually, the getting people habituated into the system or product, service or product, and then as if it is, the principle is rather to some extent fair, because then the people are offering their service at first at a cheaper price or lesser price. People are getting testing that particular product at a lower price or no price, and then they seeing the quality of that product will automatically opt for that particular product. So this is nothing unfair. I believe that it is strongly fair, because unless that product is quite good, people will not opt for it. The people sometimes make some comments on the geo selling principles, but I'm not supporting that particular company as a whole. But that principle is not unfair, because anybody has always got the option for coming out of that particular product service when it is priced. Anyway, just write down, the price must include, the price must include profit, within bracket if any, in addition to cost, in addition to cost, full stop, because product and service is implicit, in addition to cost. Hence, For most cases, price is more than cost of a product. However, due to social responsibility or long term long term business promotion policy, price may be lower than cost of a lower than cost, always product or service is implicit, lower than cost with subsidy. You know the meaning of subsidy. With subsidy either by the government for social reasons or by the corporates as a business principle. Okay. So you have understood between the difference between cost and price. This is very important whenever you just talk about something real life engineering, where the technological domain knowledge, above that, the social issues has to be also social, and the uh, economic issues also has to be considered. And now the environment is coming in a big way. Anyway, so considering this particular difference of cost and price, you have understood. Price is generally cost plus profit, but not necessarily it will always be this so simple, because there will be some taxes, as I have mentioned. Oh, this that I add the last sentence, I forgot to add up. But sometimes deliberately subsidized product is a point of controversy, and that is associated with the subsequent tariff, electricity tariff, because electricity is highly subsidized in some of the sectors in India, and that causes a lot of energy inefficiency. I'll explain, because that is coming not from the technology viewpoint, but from the socio-economic or the social behavior of the human being. Anyway, so the one sentence I've missed, just add up. Adding up taxes on a particular product or service may also may also increase the final price of a product or service. Okay, so obviously, as you have understood, that this uh, profit and the additional taxes, like in any product and service in India, now there is a GST. GST means goods and service tax. So that's a concept. I mean, politically there was a lot of debate, and industry sector was also went through a lot of debate regarding the GST introduction, because previously there was the provision of imposing tax on a product or service independently by the state and the central government, and even in some cases the local authorities like municipalities, etc. So what happened? Some of the product in a particular state was found to be of higher price, because they have imposed higher price. But if it comes under the GST, then there is a very flat standard rule. Central government and the state government will share the taxes equally. So now there is what is happening actually, and that's why one of the controversy issues of that's related to highly related to energy conservation is the petroleum price. Interestingly, there is a very big debate. The government is insisting on bringing petroleum products into a GST framework. Means whatever will be the tax imposed on, because petroleum product, petrol, diesel, etc., is highly taxed. And there, what is the actual cost of the petroleum product is quite less than what it is sold at the market. Now the issue is then the difference of these two is the not the tax of the companies they are selling petrol or other diesel, petroleum products. That is getting as a profit of the government. That basically tax is nothing other than the profit of the government, because tax can be imposed only by the government, nobody else in a democratic structure. So obviously, if a tax is imposed, previously it was for the jamindars or the kings, now it is under the right of the government only. So now, obviously, automatically, what is happening? This GST, if it comes under the if the petroleum products come under the GST framework, then what will happen? The profit making of individual states is not possible, and all of you know that the petrol diesel price varies, whatever small amount, in different states. This varies widely because of the state share of the taxes on per unit petroleum product is different. And in fact, this has serious implications on the energy conservation principles. And that is an important issue. Anyway, so that's why I'm just telling that whether the GST is good or bad, that's a debatable issue. Some political aspects are always there. In any social system analysis, politics cannot be removed. But we have to be very rational when we just work for the industry, because industry has a goal of doing something, not with scientific knowledge only, but with the social interactions. And the social interactions phase is in actual, in your real life, those who will be in professional life, especially doing management after the engineering courses, they will realize that how important is the social interactions issues, because the domain knowledge is needed. Without that, you cannot deliver any product or service. But in addition to that, how you can tackle and implement that in the social practices, and that varies globally, because whatever the business principle in India, that will not be same in an advanced country, and that will not be equally same in a very poor country or underdeveloped country like Africa. So obviously, these things are not generally taught fully in our engineering courses, not possible, course coverage. And additional management degree covers those all these issues. So that's why some of the combinations of the engineering followed by management degrees, they are more suitable for the real life practices of industries. Anyway, but it doesn't mean that any engineer without management degree cannot learn it, because these are mostly from the common sense issues. And management, as my faculty, my friends are there in IIM, they are suggesting that it's basically some sort of common sense enhancement or logical thinking process enhancement. It doesn't have so-called the syllabus structure sort of thing. Anyway, so once we have defined this, that what is cost and price, and the difference of these two we have understood very clearly. Now I'm coming to the power tariff Indian practice. Now, what is called tariff? Tariff means at what price you are offering any product to a customer. Obviously, if the person accepts it, the customer accepts that particular tariff, means he or she has to pay that particular price for per unit product or service. For example, say if you want to charge your mobile, so there are different tariffs they will be offering with different facilities. If you want to have only unlimited talk time, one particular tariff. If you want to have some talk time plus your data for the more internet, there will be another tariff. So you can choose your option. Similarly, any product also can be of different quality with associated different price. Now, power tariff means, obviously, you have understood from the terminology itself, just still mention because some of the students miss these points actually. Power tariff is the offered price per unit electric energy, not power. That means kilowatt hour. Electric energy within bracket kilowatt hour supplied to a customer, offered to a customer, not supplied, offered to a customer. Full stop. Indian power tariff widely varies depending on type of sector, SCTOR, type of sector of power supply. Full stop. As it is a basic necessity of the people, as it is a basic necessity of the people, comma, power tariff is regulated by the government though power supply industry now includes private companies also. So examples are very clear that, I mean, what is the message I want to give you? That some of the product price are purely market driven. Market driven means government doesn't interfere into that. But whenever we think about some of the service or product is like food items. Food items, government cannot leave it to the market dynamics, because people cannot decide by creating artificial prices. The rice or the wheat price will go. There is a regulations, specifically certain types of food grains which is consumed by the lower earning group. Maybe for the higher earning group of better quality or the special rice or wheat quality, government may lose their control or rather leave their control. But it doesn't mean that for the common people, government will not do anything, because government is by the people, for the people. So obviously, the tariff control, the electricity is also considered as such a product which it's a basic necessity as considered. So obviously, unless the tariff is purely controlled, in fact, currently even the not only the electricity, the most probably the telecom service is also coming under TRAI. And TRAI is basically the regulatory authority, telecom regulatory authority of India. So that also controls the, I mean, this particular maximum price of these tariff approved has to be approved by the TRAI if a private company has to make a particular price for a product. But there is a lot of, whenever there is society, there is a lot of controversy, and politics is also there, because in our locality also the CSC per unit tariff is probably, I'm telling probably because I don't currently have the data, but I know that generally CSC tariff is higher than the WBAC DCL price. So what's the difference? There are two sides of logics. One logic is, as the CSC has a better professional service for electricity, they are demanding from their side, we charge a little bit higher, but service is better. Service better means you have to pay higher. But the opposition people, they claim that CSC makes these things approved in associations with the help of the government, make better profit, and they give some of the profit share to the government. So I'm not commenting anything on this, but I work closely with CSC. They have technological issues, and I found out that they are very much professional in each of these, and they are quite good professionals in understanding the technological development, because I'm not associated with their, I mean, the revenue earnings and those issues, because maybe I'm not expert of that area. But what I understood that CSC, I worked with both CSC, DVC and the WBSC DCL, and there I found out that the approach towards a better performance, CSC has much ahead of those organizations. Unfortunately, I have to admit it. So obviously, what is ethical, what is unethical is a very difficult term to say, because the privatization is another issue, because public sector was initially, after the independence, were developed just to think about the national growth, where nobody will look after profit but grow the industries for the benefit of the society, and it has to be done, because previously British has taken the benefit from the country but no development. But if you have to do after the independence, philosophy was we have to make no profit or low profit, or rather no profit. The public sector motive was to for the social growth to contribute. But unfortunately, many of the public sector companies has become, after many years of independence, it was 75 years, that the people are taking salary, not doing anything. So obviously the conversion to the private sector has certain reasons. But again, indiscriminate conversions of private sector means you are opening your resources to the investors who have got the money, and they will have the control. Once somebody has got a more than 50% share of a company, that means the capital investment of a capital, rather the investment in a company, then they will not leave the government to do their own. They will do their interest. So more than 50% share is sometimes restricted within the government. So you will remember that 49-51% combinations of share of public and private collaboration is very common. The government want to have 51% share, in a sense that government will have the major control on that particular decision making, and maximum 49% is offered. But if it is offered more than 50 to the private player, they will decide, because they will be the majority and decision making capacity or power in the board of that particular company. Anyway, so these are the issues which can never be avoided. Sometimes this cause serious problems, but ethically in a democratic structure, these things will be there. Now I'm coming to the power tariff issue. So the power tariff is also controlled, has to be controlled by the government, because the tariff issue is decided by the government. We have got a TRI. Not TRI is basically with respect to telecom. I forgot. Most probably CEA, Central Electricity Authority. Most probably, I'm not recollecting that particular agency's name, but there is a organization which controls the central government sector and the state government sector also. The power ministry controls that particular price, has to be approved by the government. Now, sector wise different price decision is coming from long term. How this is defined is, whenever any electricity will be consumed, electricity is a service or product, you can call it, provided to a customer. Now, what is that? There is an 1 unit of electricity means 1 kWh. You can provide to for domestic consumers. You can provide it to industrial consumers, means who will use that electricity for industrial production. And you can, another classification is decided in Indian power sector. You can define in different alternative options, but in Indian industries, there is Indian rather government has defined 3 different sectors distinctly to have different tariffs for the power supply. One is the industry sector, another is the domestic sector, and third one is the specifically agricultural sector. So at first, let's just note what are the issues. So it is given that industrial and large scale commercial, this is one particular sector. Why this? How this sector is different? This sector generally has a high demand, and they consume also very large amount of electricity. What is consumed by a per unit family, that means family consists of 3, 4, 5 people, it is much lower than what is consumed in even a small commercial outlet, say a particular shopping mall like Money Square or South City Mall, etc. Large consumption of electricity happens in even a single commercial consumer, because there it's not that everybody individually, those shopkeepers or the store owners or the store leaseholders, they will pay. It will be paid by the overall owner of that particular shopping mall. That's a commercial entity, but they will tax money, or rather they will impose money for revenue for those people who are doing their business. Now the question is, the government has defined the industrial and large scale commercial sector among the highest in the world. That means out of these 3 sectors, industrial and large scale commercial sectors has been imposed as maximum per unit price of electricity, and that is not only maximum or higher than the other two, it is among the highest in the world. What's the consequences? There are consequences. I will discuss it later on. Let's at first see what are actually the status. Domestic is lower than industrial, but varies with connected load and actual consumption. This needs to be explained. That means industrial connections has highest. They have also, depending on the connected load and the actual demand. I'll explain those things later on. But agricultural sector has got the large scale unmetered, highly subsidized power on declaration, accelerated misuse of power and groundwater. What has happened to this is this: as the India large number of almost 70%, more than 70% people, now the percentage is a little bit varying, depends on the agricultural sector, but it produces less than 25%, if not less than 20% even, of the total GDP. That means people who are dependent on the agricultural sector in India is more, but they are producing less economic goods. So what is happening? Automatically, the government has a responsibility. According to, we call it, India as an agricultural country. The poor farmers, if you call it poor them, because the farmer status is also not same in India and in rather in Bengal or in Punjab. In Bengal, generally the farmers who are producing agricultural products, they are poor people. Generally, I'm telling. But in Punjab, actually, that concept has completely changed. The people have, most of the farmers are very rich. Many of their relatives are staying abroad just because of supported by the people, the farmers. The farmers are even richer than some of the commercial entity or business holders. So it depends on the state characteristics. Somehow Punjab has developed, and that has got a very interesting history because I work with the socio-economic group and I know how it was developed after the Green Revolution. But Punjab farmers are not like farmers like Bengal. There is a large difference. They have large amount of money. Now consider, if it is a national policy, if you provide highly subsidized or almost at zero price electricity, what will happen? That large amount of electricity cost government has to bear. And on the other hand, those farmers in Punjab, they are consuming that large amount of electricity at almost no cost and making more profit. Is it rational? This is the question. But this question is basically cannot be answered directly. Whether it is rational or irrational, does not exist. It exists whether politically you can solve the problem with these regulations. Now there is obviously certain, things are now getting churned, or rather getting up into addressing those issues, whether the agricultural sector lowest price or no price electricity should be there. So in summary, the power tariff, according to existing practice, are different types of tariffs. One is the industrial and large scale commercial, which is highest and very high price. Then what is the impact? Impact is industrial product cost will also be high. And interestingly, now the any of the with the globalization concept, the any industry, good industry or big industry, better to say, in a in any country, whatever may be the location, it has to be internationally competitive to reach certain above certain level. Now, to reach the international competitiveness, what is the requirement? Export. So, if you want to export your product to outside, then obviously, if it is not cost competitive, that will not get the market. Interestingly, that again that issue comes cost and price. So, whatever may be the product, it can be a food processed food item, it can be an agricultural item, it can be an industry item, say like car selling, etc. Previously, our ambassador car was protected from the outside world, and whatever maybe its efficiency was, whatever was its efficiency, only car in India running was ambassador, small car, and that was government's protection policy. But later on, that starting with Maruti, and now all the multinational companies are equally open, because now the people have the purchasing capacity, means whatever the car is available in the world, you can buy it. But previously you could not. There was an imposed restrictions by the government. That's called the economic protection. Anyway, so now the issue is, if you make a highest tariff for the industry sector, then automatically the electricity input to that particular product becomes costlier, and obviously your product also becomes costlier. It's a market competitiveness, it will lose, and it will have a negative impact on the foreign currency earned, or even in the market, domestic market, it will have a higher price, because it is an artificially inflated price due to the highest price imposed on the electricity. That is one side of criticism. But if government has to give the subsidy to the agricultural sector, which is defined as a political agenda, more political agenda than the rational agenda, I believe. But rational agenda should have been, we can think of, any common sense people can understand that dividing the farmers according to their financial earning can be very rational issues. But usually that doesn't happen in a political systems, because political system goes through the voting principles, and then obviously you cannot make that discriminations. You cannot be in power. Anyway, so these are the issues interrelated all. But agricultural sector's loss in power supply is a very critical issue for Indian energy conservation aspect. Because if you give something at zero price or almost no price, then human psychology tells it will automatically lead to misuse of that particular low price or no price product. And that has happened in industry actually. And that in agricultural sector, what has happened, one of the greatest reason of the arsenic problem is related to that particular low cost or low tariff electricity supply to the agricultural sector. Because using that low cost electricity, most of the farmers, even mostly the rich farmers, they have extracted groundwater using their pumps, and that has caused the arsenic problem mostly, because the balance between the surface water and the groundwater has got lost. So providing subsidy is very much important if it is rational, but providing subsidy to in an irrational way causes to a long-term social environmental damage. And now you know that many of the people are suffering from the arsenic problems, but it is not the sole reason. There are many other reasons, but one of the reasons is low cost electricity even in agricultural sector is reported in research literature. One of the possible reasons, because these are not the engineering literatures, but these are the interdisciplinary socio-economic literatures. I have to go through those things anyway, and the policy issues. So obviously those has got a negative impact on the societal aspect. So just the summary, I can explain what is connected load and actual load, and the captive power plants, why it is important for the industries. Just write down then the this small issue. The next paragraph, just write down the highest tariff in industry sector causes higher price of industry products and services, with restriction for lower price of their output and negative competition with respect to global market. Full stop. On the other hand, highly subsidized electricity to agricultural sector has caused CUACD several ways of misuse leading to socio-economic and environmental damages. Socio-economic and environmental damages. I'm not giving any example, though the arsenic is one of the examples people say. Next sentence, domestic sector in between. Just 1 minute. শুভ আমার ক্লাস চলছে, 9:30 পরে ফোন করবো। হ্যাঁ, না এখন আমি ক্লাস নিচ্ছি অনলাইনে, 9:30 সময় ফোন করবো। Okay. Domestic sector in between is rather rational depending on connected load and actual consumption. Now you have to understand what is connected load and actual consumption and actual load. Uh, I'm not going, I mean, these things I'm just touching on the issues because I have to cover this, I mean, rather the so called content of this particular course, which must include some technological issues. But interestingly, these issues itself can be a full research topic for the people because there are many interconnected issues that needs mathematical modeling, that needs socio-economic, I mean, social interpretations. The people from sociology has got their own way of interpreting these things, and the economics people play a big role in any decision making process, as you know. Anyway, so if you just work in industry, those who will work in industry, they will have those flavors very clearly, and that's those who will go for higher studies and research in the area, including the management area, they can understand how much important these issues are. Only technology doesn't make a real life industry. Anyway, so now I'm coming to the connected load and the actual load. What is connected load and what is actual load? From the name itself, it is a little bit clear. Any response from the class? Generally, class has got less response anyway. No response. Okay. So, what is the connected load is, say, you know that electricity on a large scale basis cannot be stored. On a small scale, the batteries are there, but on a large scale basis, it cannot be stored. That means of the order of gigawatt or so. So, what is happening? The generation and the consumption must be balanced as far as possible, and this is very much important for the any type of supply of electricity, because unless you have an estimated load for a particular electric supply, that we call the load curve, demand curve or load curve, you cannot decide your generation target. That means if you know the how much will be consumed, then only you can generate, or rather you can adjust your generation from the consumption viewpoint. In fact, currently with renewable introductions, this is becoming just reverse. You have to adjust your consumption according to generation, because generation is not within your hand always in renewable scenario, because solar systems with the availability or non-availability of the electric, I mean the light, the generations will widely vary. So you have to accommodate to the nature, and not like the previous concept of consuming limited resources of fossil fuels, where you can increase your fuel consumption to increase your generation. Anyway, these are the related to the so-called very highly sophisticated resource theory. That is another aspect of research. Anyway, so now my point is, what is connected load and what is actual load? This issue comes from the viewpoint. Just write down, because as you are not that much responsive, I'll just put it to text more. So just write down. Uh, as electricity cannot be stored on a large scale basis, its demand and supply must be close to each other, not exactly same, because grid can manage that small amount, must be close to each other to avoid grid failure. Hence, an estimation of maximum demand must be there for the supply people. Sorry, I will not allow this person, Rana Chandra Dash. Okay. Now, the next sentence is connected load is that load declared by the consumer as the maximum demand it will have at any time. So, next sentence. So, electricity supply.
Sir, can you repeat once? Maximum demand if
ম্যাক্সিমাম ডিমান্ড, হ্যাঁ আমি তাড়াতাড়ি বলে ফেলেছি। ম্যাক্সিমাম ডিমান্ড, ধর আমি তো কিছু দেখে বলি না, আমি মাথা থেকে বলি। ম্যাক্সিমাম ডিমান্ড, অন্য কেউ হেল্প করবে আমাকে? আমি কি বলেছিলাম ভুলে গেছি এর মধ্যে আবার। Anybody else? Then sentence part of the word.
It will have any time.
A maximum demand it will have any time, at any time.
okay, sir.
Because the idea is, now I can explain and you can understand the meaning of the sentence more. Connected load not declared by the supply company like CSC or WBSCDCL, like that. Connected load you have to declare 1 kilowatt, 10 kilowatt. That's domestic consumption. You can also have to a very high, up to maximum limit, because then the supply transformer will have a problem. So obviously you can deny, rather declare within certain, say you have a big house with say 4-5 AC. So what will happen when you switch on all those ACs simultaneously? Then as a single consumer, you will consume much larger amount of electricity, because AC is it needs separate line, because it needs a 15 ampere connections and all these things. It consumes a lot of electricity. The question is, if you, so obviously for new installation of any AC, I don't know whether you know, all of you, because you have to declare to the electric company that this is the new AC I want to get installed, and they will make an assessment whether it is within your connected load already or it needs enhancement. So if required, they will take fees, they will increase the supply chain line or the supply system with higher gauge of electric wires, etc., at the supply point, and then only they will give you the permission to install that particular AC. So that's why connected load is that load what the consumer declares based on his capacity and the intention of consumption. Say I want 5 kilowatt connection, or I want 10 kilowatt connection, or I need, if I am a rather comparatively lower income person and I have less gadgets, I can declare I need only 1 kilowatt connection. So connected load is the responsibility of the consumer to declare. But next is the actual load. What will happen as the electricity pattern, it depends on how many devices simultaneously are on. So if you simultaneously switch on your AC, your refrigerator, your television, your maybe some more sound systems, etc., then each will consume electricity. Now obviously this load will go on varying over the day, but your connected load is controlled by your declared agreement with the electric supply company, and that is controlled by the so-called fuse in the line. If it exceeds that amount, automatically the fuse will go off. You will never allow to increase that particular connected load amount more than that connected load amount. But actual load always has to be lower than that. But your actual energy consumption, because load, etc., is are all rate per unit electricity, per unit time. Sorry, per unit time consumption, not per unit electricity, per unit time consumption. But that being at peak doesn't mean always the total energy consumption that in that particular day, one particular peak is very high, but maybe over the day you have consumed lesser power, so that the overall energy consumption is less. Billing will be on the, not on the basis of the peak of that particular demand, but it will be, billing will be on the basis of that overall energy consumption. But interestingly, your connected load already declared, you cannot exceed your connected load by your in your actual demand. So that Connected load maximum, once you declare your electric gadgets capacity overall total, because you can switch on all those gadgets, that's your independence or rather your freedom. But if you switch on all those gadgets, it must, the total demand load or the consumed load must be less than your connected load, or rather matching with exactly with the maximum connected load, otherwise your fuse will go off. So now the connected and actual load, as you have understood, actual load is basically the actually what is the it is consuming, though the connected load may be higher than that, and it has to be higher than that. Now the question is, the domestic sector tariff depends on what you ask for the connected load. It has different slabs like income tax slabs. Say if you demand up to 5 kilowatt, from 0 to 5 kilowatt, there is one tariff. That means per unit price of electricity is little bit lower. If you go for higher slab, the next slab may be 5 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt. Within that slab, the per unit electricity may have a higher price in the higher slab. That means more the connected load, more will be the unit price tariff for the domestic sector. This is quite rational and good approach, because if you consume more, you have to pay more for per unit, because this is the concept of so-called, resource theory, that if you consume more natural resources, you should pay more. But the same amount having within the range of 5 kilowatt, that is considered to be your basic need. But if you increases your electrical appliances and devices going up to the 10 kilowatt, then you have to pay more. Anyway, so just write down, in domestic sector, per unit tariff of electricity, is lower for lower connected load. There are different slabs, SLABS, slabs of connected load for which unit price of electricity also vary. Comma, higher the slab, higher will be the per unit electricity tariff. This is true for both domestic and industrial sector. Both domestic and industrial stroke the commercial লিখতে পারো, because they are under the same slab, same category. This is true for both domestic and industrial stroke commercial sectors. Okay, so now you have a generalized picture, overall picture. Tariff is defined on the basis of three different sectors, whether industrial or commercial sector, or domestic sector, or agricultural sector. Out of which agricultural sector is highly subsidized, almost zero price, and there is no concept of tariff, on the basis of slabs, etc. So misuse is still there. But it is changing a little bit now actually. Government has got certain restrictions on some of the issues. I'm not going to those discussions in details because it's not possible. But this is the general principle of agricultural sector providing electricity, from the concept that agricultural is most of the cases all over the country. The poor people do it and they need subsidy, so government is providing subsidy in that form. Second is the domestic sector, where there is rational approach of putting different slabs of the unit price of electricity as the tariff. And third is the industrial or large commercial sector, where still people criticize that government could have reduced this price or tariff a little bit more just because of their market competitiveness with respect to, specifically with respect to international competitions of export. Anyway, so the issues are there, and large number of papers are available in the interdisciplinary power sector studies from different in the interdisciplinary approach. The people have a lot of criticism and a lot of analysis of those issues. So connected load and actual load also you have understood. Then the captive power plants. What is this? Any response from the class? No. No response. Oh, electrical students are not there this year. That's why maybe less response, because they are supposed to know all these things much better. Anyway, so now you find out that the industrial government regulations, as per the government regulations, if you want to purchase the electricity from the market, you have to pay the highest price. So what you can do, industry has either the option of taking the electricity from the market at that very high price as assigned to them. Otherwise, what can they do? They can tell, I will generate my own electricity. I don't depend on any electricity supply company. This is one good option, because sometimes it happens. There are two issues. One important issue is the cost of electricity production is within the purview of the company. But because government cannot just impose someone of, obviously government permission is required and government has to give the permission, and that has been accepted also by the government, that if some of the industries who consume large amount of power, they will not buy power from the market. They will generate their own electricity by themselves. Plus side is not only their cost of electricity is less, plus side is they have their own responsibility and control of assured power supply, because they are generating their electricity by their own power plant. So what will happen? They can have well maintenance, but in domestic, from the market, if you buy your electricity, then there is a high possibility that there will be some interruptions in the supply and your production system will get affected. So captive power plants has got two profitable aspect. One aspect is you can decide, or rather you can rather control the power cost. It's not depending on the tariff at all. And number two is you have a better control on your electricity supply for the production of your product or service. But the limitations is, obviously you can understand, unless you consume electricity above certain value, your installation cost of your installation and operation cost for your captive power plant will not be justified. You cannot generate a captive power plant with 1 kilowatt. But currently the scenario is changing, because previously the concept of captive power plant was only thermal power plant. And a coal-based power plant or gas-based power plant or oil-based power plant can have that capacity not below certain value, because you will not have the equipment. 1 kilowatt thermal power plant is not available in the market. Nobody manufactures it because it has a low efficiency and no market of manufacturing those things. On the other hand, currently the renewable energy introduction is causing a lot of change in scenario, because many people have got their capacity to, if they have large land acquired, they can install the solar power plants, and they can take that risk on the basis of forecast, because my research group also work on that. You have to make a forecasting of that particular load demand based on the previous year's trends, either using the AI based techniques, artificial intelligence based technique, or a rigorous calculations of what is the demand. That's we call forecasting. Forecasting means beforehand you are just predicting what will be your load, and based on that forecasting of the weather, how the weather will vary for the next few years. Based on that, you can estimate how much solar energy electricity production is possible and whether that is enough for catering to your, that you have to make an estimation. So the captive power plants are currently not necessarily has to be thermal power plants, but this is not very common actually. Still in India, renewable energy based captive power plant has not appeared to be very common. Still, the captive power plants in India is defined as thermal power plants. So just write down a little bit short notes so that for your examination purpose that serves. Just write down, captive power plants are those Captive power plants are those smaller power plants owned by a company, owned and operated by a company for their for their THEIR self consumption, ACLF, self consumption. Full stop. This means the company decides comma install installs okay, decides comma installs and operate its own captive power plant according to its need, ITS NWD, and is beyond the control of and is beyond the control of power tariff regulations of the government. Full stop. Just one sentence I want to add. Captive power plants are efficient and cost effective for larger electricity demand of an industry with conventional fossil fuel based with conventional fossil fuel based power plants. Full stop. However, with renewable power technology, smaller capacity captive power plants are also possible. Okay. Any queries up to this? Because this was, though I couldn't finish up in last class because this needs a lot of discussions. So in this, if I make a summary of this last part of the slide, power tariff, you have understood what is it. Then you have understood how it is depending on the different sectors and their corresponding impact. It is existing in India, but the power tariff structure is not identical all over the world. Different country, depending on their, some of the countries have got their least price, even lesser than the domestic sector for the industry power, because they believe that their industry product will be international market competitive, and they will earn money for the country, etc., etc. So every country has got their own policy principles, but I'm discussing only the Indian power tariff principle, where agricultural electricity is still given at a very low price, and industry power is basically at the highest price, almost competitive with the highest in the world. So this is, whether it is good or bad, that's a different issue, but this is the existing situation. And then I have discussed that the tariff depends on the connected load and actual load, and you have now understood that connected load depends on the declarations of the consumer. They have to declare just because to maintain the grid stability, and then the actual load must be less than equal to maximum connected load. And then you have understood that the depending on the power tariff being suitable or not, industry decides of their own captive power plants. And in the own captive power plants, the policy is very clear. If it becomes a break-even point, that means at that particular demand is such of a particular specific industry, they can install their own power plants, because thermal based power plants are not available for smaller capacity. So at minimum capacity should be there, so that you can consume by yourself. You cannot sell your electricity generation in captive power plant generally as per the regulations of the government. You can install your captive power plant, government will give the permission, but you have to consume those electricity generation. You cannot sell it into the market again. So obviously, because the license for the power supply and license for the captive power plants are two different categories. So if somebody wants to make a new power supply, say the Tata Power, Reliance Power, they're all there in the market, private players. But and simultaneously NTPC, WBSC, DCL, other state electricity boards are all there on each of the states, government owned. But these licenses are given to the private sectors as power supply license only. But captive power plant license is something different. They cannot do the rest of their power to sell to the market. Then it will become something in regulatory aspect. Some difficulties will be there, because it's going under the law, the legal structure. Anyway, so we have understood what is power tariff and what is the Indian practice. Now let's go to the, up to this, I guess there is no questions, because generally there does not exist any question in the class. Anyway, I'm going to the next slide. So let's see, because so energy conservation, background and definition. So if I may not need much time to discuss these things, because all this has been already discussed repeatedly, and you can just correlate or connect, so that you can understand that the natural resources were considered as available resources to be used indiscriminately for benefit of the people. This actually originated that particular concept of energy conservation, because no doubt that that the mathematically we, in many of the cases we find out that a large number can be considered equivalent to infinity. And that also has come into the considerations of the fossil fuel based systems, when initially those fossil fuel based systems found in abundant amount, people thought of these resources to be unlimited. Thought of, I'm not telling they're 100% confident. That means there are a lot of resources available, and they can simply go on consuming those things. And in fact, if without that thing, the current industrial revolution would not have happened without the fossil fuel support. So whether it is good or bad, because we have to work on sustainable energy, I actually basically work in that area. There I have found out that I cannot justify the using fossil fuels, because otherwise the civilization development would not have happened. That was very much required of using the fossil fuels to a greater extent. But life is dynamic. Now you have realized that with population increase and the electricity consumption, with improved living standard, you have to restrict yourself. Now you have to revert back your practice of using the limited fossil fuels. And that is the energy conservation principle. So initially, natural resources were considered to be as available resources to be used indiscriminately for benefit of the people. This concept was wrong. This was right at that time, now wrong currently, because with large consumption, in fact, in last 200 years, we have consumed about 60% of our estimated total fossil fuel reserves. So within the last 200 years, we have consumed almost 60%, which is the available. But this estimation may a little bit vary, because we may have some future discovery of some more reserves. Anyway, so but still, approximately as I have discussed the scenario of coal, oil and gas, you have realized that within the next 50 years, the oil and gas rather the oil is going to be completely depleted, but coal has got a better future of around 200 years estimated according to the R by P ratio, reserve by production ratio. Anyway, so this was the in the background this happened, and there was a tacit assumption that these resources were virtually infinite. This was tacit, why I'm telling, because it was not explicit, but people had got on the basis of that the use was also very much indiscriminate. So then, though erroneous, the fossil fuel reserves are limited, though enormous, sorry, not erroneous, though enormous, fossil fuel reserves are limited and will be depleted sometime depending on the consumption rate. And this realization happened actually after 1973 when that oil shock has happened. That also I have mentioned later. Just you can find the point here. These fossil fuels were formed over millions of years because they take some formations, you need millions of years, and that's not within your control. No artificial process of producing the fossil fuels by creating that pressure and temperature will be effective, because this that's why the now the currently that term we are using, nature based solution. I mean, those who are going for the international competitions of innovations, always there is one topic which is called nature-based solution. Nature-based solutions means how nature proceeds. If you can follow that, that may be a sustainable options that can be repeated without problem and indefinitely. So what nature does is always it has got a general tendency of making it a cyclic process. So if you can make a nature-based solutions, what happens in a nature and follow that and find out or mimic that particular process, you can be you can deliver an innovation product which can be useful. Anyway, so we have got that particular. It will take some several millions of years, and but for the consumption, it may take some only few years. So obviously, the production of fossil fuels, we cannot expect that we can artificially produce those things also for our future consumption. Ruled out. So it has a limited resource. Then with oil crisis, which is called the oil shock, we have discussed a lot. In 1973, there is the Ramadan war between the Israel and the Arabian countries, and the artificial crisis was created by these oil-producing countries, OPEC, and the entire Europe mostly shocked by that particular, because US has got a lot of their own oil capacity, and they have make a rather management. And currently, the European countries are suffering for the Russian gas supply, because the sometimes the crisis is not due to the resource but due to the political issues, and that is also important because ultimately people are suffering, because in political aspect, the Ukraine was going to be included in the European Union, and then Russia has got the objection. So whoever are in favor of Ukraine, most of the European Union has put into the restrictions of the Russian gas supply, because maximum gas to the European countries is supplied by the single country, Russia. So they have put imposed restrictions on that. Anyway, so this is the politics and related to the so-called real life situation. So similarly to the oil shock, I don't know whether in future this particular shock will be defined as a gas shock. It can be. The terminology comes from the international forum. In future, maybe this Russia-Ukraine war may be declared as a gas shock, whatever may be. So from the oil shock in 1973, that has been realized by the very few countries had sufficient fossil fuel reserves, and so obviously it has to suffer. So several measures were initiated to avoid with energy vulnerability, technological, economic, socio-political, and that is all aspects will not be possible to cover here. We will discuss some technological, some economic, but socio-political issues are whatever has been discussed currently. It will end up after that, because it will not be possible to come back, because these are also very involved issues. Energy efficiency and energy conservation initiatives were initiated worldwide after this oil shock. This is the origin of the current energy conservation concept. Maybe it is also getting transformed. The next slide I will show how it has got, and I discussed also. Initially, it started with that 1973 war, but then obviously it has got a new turn with respect to the climate change issues. And then obviously climate change has mixed up with the energy conservation, because it's a win-win situation. Better energy conservation means better climate change mitigation problem also if you use the fossil fuels. So obviously, and then overall sustainability concept, as we have discussed earlier in the Brundtland Commissions, etc., it has matched with the so-called objective functions of the overall global goal. So obviously, currently the energy conservation mission, what is going on, has originated from the so-called oil shock experience. Later, climate change was also identified as a global threat, and indiscriminate use of fossil fuels, mostly coal, is found to be a major cause of climate change. So obviously, you can understand that better energy conservation means for per unit utility output, you can have lesser fossil fuel consumption, and lesser fossil fuel consumption means less CO2 emission. So obviously, better energy conservation indirectly helps the climate change mitigation also. Then United Nations defined sustainable development, as I mentioned earlier already, because you know that the three pillars of sustainable development: social, economic, and environmental. And as the overall global goal, both climate change and the energy conservation are included in it. That means within the sustainable development definitions, the climate change has become one of the sustainable development goal. Similarly, that particular energy conservation has also become under the clean and affordable energy section. I don't remember the number, maybe most probably 7 or 9. Anyway, so energy is one of the clean and affordable energy supply is out of those 17 climate change goals. One is basically related to energy, and another is related to the so-called the climate change aspect. So all are now encompassed within the definitions of the so-called sustainable development. So with this, now I'm going to the next slide. Now this is not many new issues, only I have defined formally. This definition I'm telling not available in any book. You can find a little bit modified definitions in other literature or other in other published documents, but I have defined it myself just because of for my teaching in this class. It is defined as energy conservation is the subject which explores principles and measures to adopt for reduction or elimination if possible. Elimination 100% may not be always possible, because by in the name of energy conservation, you cannot stop using energy. So that's why always remember that the reduction of energy waste is the objective, not the full elimination always possible. So it to adopt for reduction or elimination if possible energy waste in a process and increases efficiency of the energy utilization in a cost effective manner. Unless the measure recommended is cost effective, it will never be accepted, because the more costlier thing than the existing things will less social acceptance. So obviously, you have to make these energy conservation measures in a must, in a mandatory cost-effective way. That's the innovation aspect. That's why in energy conservation, a lot of innovations are involved. An objective function is very clear: to save the limited resources of fossil fuels as far as possible. In fact, this definition, as it is made by myself only, this may have certain limitations, and if any student can give me a feedback that this has got these limitations, I will be happy. At least till that nobody has given such feedback. And obviously, this is any definition means you have to innovatively think and cover all possible aspects. I've tried to cover it in my definitions. This is given in this way. But obviously, if somebody can find out that it is not covering the objective functions or other the method of energy conservation, then I can change my definitions from the next year or other this year itself. Now, after these definitions of energy conservation, we have the two different terms: sustainable development and the climate change. And this is not going to discuss time again, because you have, as far as I remember, the sustainable development goals has been defined, isn't it? I mean, discussed, is it not? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So then it's done. And climate change, obviously, it's discussed in at length, and it doesn't need, because the basic thing all of you know that the greenhouse gas effect. I mean, it retains the solar radiation within the earth, and so the average temperature of the earth is increasing slowly. So we have to reduce the carbon dioxide emission to the atmosphere. That's the climate change main problem, and this is the interrelated with the energy conservation, because if you can reduce the fossil fuel consumption, automatically the emissions of the carbon dioxide will decrease. Now, last important aspect is energy efficiency versus energy conservation. This is very important to understand. Do you think these two are identical or they are different? Any response from the class? One term is the energy efficiency, another term is the energy conservation. Do you think these two things are absolutely identical, or they are a little bit different but linked? No response.
Sir, energy efficiency.
Little bit louder, please. আমার শব্দটাকে বাড়িয়ে নিই। বলো, little bit louder.
Energy efficiency may be defined as the amount of energy which is put to work out of the energy which we are supplying, and energy conservation is means the definition is already there.
Good. At least you have attempted. In fact, very rightly identified, efficiency means always output by input. So energy efficiency is an approach of increasing the overall generation or utilizations of energy. It can be during the generation, say in a coal-based power plant. What is happening? You are giving your input as the coal energy input or other coal input, and you are getting your output as the electricity. So per unit electricity productions with lesser amount of coal will give you a better efficiency. So energy efficiency increase is always good, no doubt. But energy conservation not necessarily always mean only energy efficiency. Because energy conservation means, say you are replacing your fossil fuel based system by renewable energy systems. Then what is happening? The objective function, as I have defined in the top of the slide, it's basically the objective function is to save the limited resources of fossil fuels. So anything that replaces the use or rather reduces the use of the fossil fuels is an energy conservation measure. So switching over from the fossil fuel based system to the renewable energy, which is also contributing to the climate change problem, is also an energy conservation measure. So more non-conventional or renewable energy systems use is also contributing to the energy conservation. So as if energy conservation has a broader perspective than the energy efficiency. Any energy efficiency measure contributes to the energy conservation, but all energy conservation measures may not necessarily be a part of the energy efficiency measures. So just write down. Do you need it in text or you have understood? Or the small text may be better because you sometimes forget because all are not equally serious. Anyway, just write down. Energy efficiency means more output within quote, more output within quote, for lesser input within quote, either for energy conversion or for energy consumption. One is conversion, CONVERSION, another is consumption, CONSUMPTION. Next sentence, better energy efficiency always supports energy conservation. So any energy efficiency measure contributes to energy conservation. Full stop. But as the basic objective of energy conservation is to save the limited fossil fuel reserves, many other measures than energy efficiency can also be an energy conservation measure. Can also be an energy conservation measure. Hence, energy efficiency is fully included in energy conservation, but energy conservation may have other measures than energy efficiency also. Okay, in short, I have discussed than energy efficiency also, because this sometimes the industry confuses about these two measures. I have found out in many senior industry persons still confuse this because they take these two things as synonymous. But at least from the academic perspective, we don't consider these to be synonymous. They are linked. All energy efficiency measures will lead to energy conservation, but energy conservation measures are not restricted within energy efficiency only. There can be several other measures which has no relations with the, whenever you are replacing your coal-based power plant to say solar powers. Is it has got any efficiency issue? No, at all. Because the efficiency definition terms itself is also getting different in these two aspects. Because in solar, you are getting solar radiation free of cost. But in conventional fossil fuel based systems, you have to purchase fuel. So operating cost was related to the fuel consumption. So obviously, these two cannot be compared at all with respect to the energy efficiency perspective. But this is undoubtedly energy conservation measures, because if the need of that electricity is provided by the renewable power, then you are consuming lesser fossil fuels. Achha. So if there is no question, I will go to the roll call. But before that, one request from me. Next Saturday and Sunday I will be out of Kolkata. I have an inside teacher assignment, because I am an inside teacher already. I have an assignment outside Kolkata, so I have to leave for a remote lecture. I'll go in a remote place. So please provide me 2 equivalent classes next week, starting from Monday, because Saturday Sunday there will be no classes and these are not holidays. I will miss classes, means I will be in trouble in later, because I have many other assignments outside the university scenario. Because next week I have to go to in November I have to go to again one Bengal Chambers one all the chapter program. So I will miss some of the classes. That's why I'm telling you, discuss within yourselves any class, if not full 1.5 hours, at least 1 hour class will provide me 2 for 2 specific days, starting not earlier than 8 p.m. because in daytime I have some other assignments like your classes. So please join, offer that particular slot not before 8 p.m. as usual. Somebody's trying to enter now. Interesting. Anyway, what is the purpose of these people entering now? I don't know. So I'm going to so with this appeal, because next week, Saturday, Sunday, there will be no classes. So I'm requesting you again to provide me a slot before, in the coming week, other than Saturday, Sunday. So respond to your roll numbers. Sheikh Mohammed Ali. Let me come out of the presentation. Stop presenting. Sheikh Mohammed Ali absent. Then Diptendu Gupta.
Present, sir.
Okay. Then Shaunak Agarwala. No.